Good afternoon. Welcome to Eretz Israel. I'm R Avraham Shira. Across the valley here, there's a village called Beit Omar, and for 26 years, I have been listening to the Friday afternoon sermon of the Muazzin, or the Muhtar, or whoever he is. There's different levels, of course. And he is vociferous. I mean, this guy, you don't need to speak a word of Arabic to understand what he's saying. And every once in a while you hear Tabah Layud, right? Death to the Jews. So, we got the picture. We got the direction over here. And, it makes you wonder about Islam. What kind of religion is this? Okay, well, we study a little bit of history about Islam, and we understand that in the Quran, there are certain episodes which describe to us that Muhammad converted people with the sword. Let's not go too far with that, right? And you wonder what kind of people would believe in a religion that converted people with the sword. Is that really what God's about? Is that what God needs from humanity? Is that what God needs from a prophet? Convert or die? Is that the kind of follower you would like? He's following you because you got a lot of men with a lot of swords. So you hear this guy every week, and after a while, it's like background music, a little more aggressive than Muzak, at the mall. But the rabbis say an astonishing thing. They say that at the end of days, Yishmael, the first son of Abraham and Hagar, who was a princess of Egypt, a Middle Eastern people all the way, Yishmael would return to God, to the God of his fathers, to the God of Abraham, to the idea of the monotheistic ruler of the universe. Well, if he returns, that's a pretty big deal. He was a prince. He had 12 sons that all founded countries here in the Middle East. Many of their names are still embedded in the peoples around us. The Saudi Arabians claim to be the original Yishmaelites. The original sons of the sons of the sons that go all the way back, and you know how religion loves the pedigree of genetics, of genealogy. And there is something to pedigree. All religions use it as a weight on the scales of their self-justification. We still have to be good people. We still have to follow the book. But we already wonder about the book, and we wonder about the man who brought that book into the world and the practice he used to build his religion. But Yishmael was more than 3,000 years before Muhammad hit the stage. What was in between for all the tribes of the Middle East and North Africa? What was there? Well, there were a lot of cults. Now, when we talk about cults, we're not talking about the kind of cults where you all drink Kool-Aid and go to heaven. We're talking about cults that practice the occult. They practice sorcery. They practice necromancy, speaking to the dead. They practice the incantation of spells. I've had people call me, Avraham, what do? I think my family's been cursed by a magician, a sorcerer or magician is a nicer word, from Senegal or from Cameroon. These African states also, they're filled with practitioners of the black arts. Now, we've got this Hollywood conditioned mind to think of these things in very simple terms. We don't understand the power. But as we speak this day and every day, there are Islamic or Muslim, or if you want to just call them Arabic practitioners of the occult, not far from here. And you can go to them. And even if you're a white man, a Christian, you can go to them and you can pay them and they will curse someone for you or bless somebody. And you know what? I wouldn't practice that. I wouldn't recommend that to anybody. Islam itself is against sorcery with the penalty of death, just like Judaism. But when a man wants knowledge about the future, he'll pay dearly for it, especially when it has to do with war and money. Okay. But the rabbis say Yishmael will return. We also know that he returned around the time of the death of his father, Abraham. That probably broke his heart a little bit. And we know that a broken heart is the most precious offering to God. Not, slaughtered animals, and not lots of words, but the heart itself is the place where Hashem can dwell in a human being. And if you open the heart and it breaks a little bit, you make room for an infinite being, well, he's happy to move in for a while until you do something against his will. Now, in Kabbalah, we understand there's this triangle of Abraham, Yishmael, the oldest son, from Hagar, and Isaac from Sarah. Isaac became the forefather of the Jewish people. Ishmael became the prince of these other tribes that became many nations. And perhaps today 1 billion people, give or take. He was promised that as a reward. And he was promised great wealth, and he was promised the Shmanei Aretz, which literally means the oil of the land. The oil of the land. Well, we know what that's done to the world economy and to world industry. But this triangle is a very interesting thing in the Kabbalah because it's a paradigm, a form, a structure, a pattern that gets repeated over and over throughout human history. And what's the structure? Well, Abraham represents kindness. Isaac represents strength. Jacob represents truth. Yishmael, well, Judaism has a problem with Yishmael. He wasn't included in the tree, but we know he's connected to the power of Isaac. The power of judgment, the power of might, the power of war. By his sword he will live, and by his sword he will die. And you see that's, well, unfortunately, just behind my shoulder, 45 miles, we had the greatest tragedy we've had in a long, long time. And most people are still in shock. Most people are still trying to process it. I have no idea how people that don't have faith in the Torah and in the stories and in the traditions of Judaism, how they process this event. But I do know one thing. Part of the human psyche wants to reject something so evil. It can't be part of us. But I put together a little talk, so bear with me. Because this talk, I'm going to try to address this part of us that can't bear. And what do we do with the information of the events that took place almost a week ago? Okay. I have to keep telling myself that those people aren't dead. They just exist in a higher plane, an extremely high plane. Because when someone dies because he's a Jew, it's as if your entire life, everything you've ever done that's not been good is erased, and the holy spark of that soul rises to its heavenly abode, which maybe is a spiritual condo in a very, 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 a building taller than the Burj Khalifa, right? And so that gives us a little bit of comfort. Plus, we know that there were really a lot of wonderful people there, and that they came to do what they did, and they really didn't die just for them, for their sins. That's a ridiculous idea. God is not that much of a butcher God forbid, that he would calculate each person. Oh, you sin like this, we're gonna cut your head off at a rock concert or a dance. No, that's not the way it works, folks. It is impossible for the human brain to calculate the matrix of God's purpose. The matrix means the interrelations of all our good deeds, all our bad deeds, all we would do if we stayed alive, all we wouldn't do if we didn't. Everything that we've done in past lifetimes, who can even begin to calculate the truth and the justice that is appropriate for every soul? Nobody. Now, there are people that do that. They just go out straight away and say things. But when you spend 30 years in Kabbalah, in a yeshiva with truly righteous, God-fearing people who don't open their mouths for nothing, you learn to not open your mouth so much. Now, here I am opening my mouth for many years on these pixelated waves that connect us all, because we're suffering. You go out to the market, everybody's trying to keep a face, but you can see behind the face great suffering, great worry. Some people have more faith, some people have less faith, so that also shines through a little bit. But the suffering, of course, is not knowing why. And the truth is, I didn't really start to put this class together to answer that question, why it happened. Because it's too big a question and it's got too big an answer. You have to write a 1,000,000-page novel to figure out how each person in this horrible event was connected to it somehow, and what God's calculation is. But what I do know is that throughout Jewish history, people do die for a greater cause. And that God takes the young and the good and the sweet and the pure and the holy